Okay, so now moving further, the first thing that we'll be doing is we'll be working into the course sales.js, which is our component. So we won't be touching the app.js. It is not much bothered about anything going on. So let's go into the course sales, and we'll first of all remove this guy. I am from the course sales page, and make sure everything is working at this point. So that would be a good point. And let's just remove this guy in here. We don't need you. Okay. Now let's try to build this app from the very and let me give you an idea of what this app is going to look like. So it's going to be a simple app where you'll have multiple list of your courses, and as you click on any of them, it gets selected, and you can select multiple of them, and whatever the pricing would be, keep adding, and we'll be displaying a final paragraph with the total. And in the total, the sum of those clickable or clicked courses will be selected, kind of a multiple selection at the same time. You can also click some course again, and that will be removed from your list. So you might have already seen that into the demo of the projects that we have done in the very start of the course. Okay, so let's go in here. Now, the very first thing that obviously we need is a method that can simply add the pricing of the course, and in case he needs it, he may be able to subtract them as well. Okay, but we'll figure that out on the go. The second thing that we require is a total amount. So total amount would have some initial data, which would be 0. Obviously the pricing would be, or the total price checkout of the value would be 0. So let's just go there, and just above the render, we'll declare our constructor. Now, declaring the constructor is really simple. All you have to do is rcon for the constructor, and now you might be thanking me every single time that I have given you those snippets, and this is making your life easy. So let's call this as total, and obviously it's going to have an initial value of 0. So that is our total. Now, next thing that we need is a method that can calculate the pricing and can update this total, because that total will be displayed on the screen later on. Okay, so just above the constructor, I would like to define my method there, and that would be, let's just call this as sum price, because it's going to sum up the pricing values, and it's going to take one argument, that is whatever the pricing is being passed on. For example, you have clicked on iOS dev course, so that item's pricing will be passed on to this function. Okay, I hope you get the idea. And all it's going to do is going to update the state. So we're going to call this dot set state, and in the pair of parentheses, it's going to update the state of total, and total is going to be updated by this dot state, and obviously you cannot access the total directly, so you have to call in this dot state dot total, and the pricing would be added. Now notice I'm saying that when somebody clicks on that, the pricing will be added, but I'm also saying that somebody clicks on it 2 times, then it will be removed from the total pricing. So you might be wondering that we are going to write some another method that would be saying decrease the price or maybe subtract the course from there. No, we are not going to do that. We are going to just pass the pricing in the negative value if somebody clicks that on twice. And obviously for that, we need a state variable, which is going to hold the state that whether that paragraph is active or not. Okay, so I hope you're getting where we are moving on further with this. Okay, so this is good. And obviously if we have got the sum price, we need to bind this into the constructor. And again, don't forget to do this, because you'll be spending a lot of time in debugging your application, and at the end of the day you'll be finding that, hey, I forgot to bind this method. Now this is all being done because this method is sometime not being accessed or is not in the scope of this, and this is again a different kind of a subject to talk around in here, so let's just not discuss it much. Let me just say you a straightforward rule there. Whenever you declare a function, you have to bind it. You can bind it on the go whenever you're using, but it's a much better syntax to do it in the constructor. Quite a lot of talk there. Okay, so there we go. And now the next thing that we'll be doing is we'll be accessing that array and we'll be looping it through. And again, for the looping, I have found out that the best way of looping around would be to use the map function there. So just after the render where I have console the items, every items, let's try to do that. And obviously we'll be storing them into a courses variable. and let's try to access this. It's really simple. This dot props dot items, and we'll be using a method known as dot map. Obviously, read out the docs. It's just basically an iterator which automatically iterates through an array, and it can have a callback function. So there we go, our callback function, and we'll be using a quick ES6 syntax, which I found much more easier. And I'll close this guy. Now this map takes two things. We can call this as an item in here. Pretty much you can call it anything, item, ABC, maybe kind of a bank or whatever you like to call it, but I think item is a much better word there. And also it gives you an index value as well. Now basically you will use I in just passing as a key because it's a unique value there. Okay, so that is good so far, and all we are gonna do is return, if I can type it correctly, return. And now the interesting part comes in. Now obviously we could have just returned it into a paragraph and could have right there, or could have stored that into some variables or just like that. But what I'll be doing in here is I'll return it into another component. Okay, and for right now I'll be just declaring this component in the same file, but as an assignment I'll give you a simple assignment to move this component into a separate file. Okay, so I'll be doing rcom for component, and I'll call this component as simply course. Okay, and we'll deal up the things. And the reason why I'm breaking it down into a separate component is to make sure that we don't overdo the things in just one component. Okay, so let's just go into the return and let's call this as course. Okay, and let's close it down as well. Now we'll be passing a lot of things in this course component as a property, and obviously the properties are accessible by this component. So let's go in here and start doing it. So the first thing that we'll be passing is name, and to access the name it's really simple. We're gonna say item dot name. Okay, and if you remember, this guy is iterating over all the items, and first it has given us the item name there, and the next thing it's going to give us is the price. It's really simple to access, item dot price. Okay, that is good. Now obviously we'll be passing on a couple of more values. I'll separate that in here. That makes much more sense in here. And the next thing that we need to pass on is the key, otherwise it's going to complain to us, and all we have to do is I as well. Okay, now that is good so far. But if you remember that this component will surely need this access of this method sumPrice. If we define this method again, it doesn't really make sense. So what you can do is you can pass on this access to this sumPrice via a prop as well. So we'll do that. And what we're gonna do is let's just space there, and let's just have sumPrice, name it the same, and we're gonna simply say this dot sumPrice. And now this property will have an access to this method, and if we pass on anything like price or anything, it's gonna just change the state of this total. So I hope you are understanding what we are linking in here. Now also we are gonna need one more thing, that is gonna be a state, kind of a boolean value for true or false. So we'll call this as simply active, and this will tell us whether the item is active or not. So we're gonna simply say item dot active. Okay, and the reason why actually we are doing this is to make sure that we are just having some state that, and we are having some idea about whether this state or this particular element or this course is actually active or not. I'll discuss this particular thing later on detail. I hope rest of the things are pretty much clear to you. Okay, that is good so far. And I believe that we are finding some error in here because this guy is not at all working. So let me quickly do that. And I think this should have an access of everything. And let me just go there. And I think this should be okay now. Okay, this is okay. This was not accepting the ending. So far it's good. Not complaining much. Okay. Now let's go into the division there, and first of all I'll have a simple h1 there, and let's close the h1 as well, and this is gonna say simply you can buy courses. Okay, save that. How does it look? Not good, but we'll work that. Now, right now, what I want to do is we'll figure out the things later on. Right now, I just want to do one thing, is to display whatever this courses variable is holding in. So I'll just simply say courses, and I think that is good. Let's just save that. And it doesn't display anything in here. Let's just try that out, because it's just a variable and the component is not defined. Obviously, that is why it's not displaying, but we'll figure out the things later on. And also we need to display this total as well, so that we can see what the final pricing is. Okay, so what I'll be doing is, in fact, it would be a good idea if I wrap this courses into a separate division there. So let me quickly do that. So a div there, and I'll provide it a special ID, and that ID would be courses. That will help me to write some good CSS so that I can pass it on to you. And obviously I have to close this division, and there we go. Writing manual HTML is not a good idea. I'm not a big fan of it. Okay, there we go, looks good. And I'll have a paragraph tag in there as well to display the final total amounts there. Okay, and it would be having an ID. Oops, not in here. ID equals total, and we'll write some CSS later on for that. Total, and then inside a B tag, which is just for a bold tag. You can use the strong tag as well, no big deal for that. Okay, and we're gonna display some pricing, and let's just say it's gonna be simply this dot state dot total. So there we go, total is 0 so far, and we are not getting anything. And obviously we could have done everything in here, but right now our almost half logic is done in here. Now the next thing that we'll be doing will be a meat part of this, will be in the course components. So let's do that in the next video.